Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to look at the syllabus for MBA CET. Now, please note that the official authority, which is basically the CET cell, they have never published a syllabus as such. But when you look at the CET over the last couple of years, you see a pattern, you see types of questions getting repeated, you see subtopics or topics that are focused on. So that is what we are going to share in this video, and that kind of defines the syllabus of the Maharashtra MBA CET. So let's get started. Now let's first understand the format of the test. So CET, in the last couple of years, they have had this particular format. In the past, they used to have this format, then they changed it for a while in between. There have been years when this distribution has been very different for different slots. And in the last couple of years, however, it has remained stagnant. So now this is what the format is. So logical reasoning is 75. You have quantitative aptitude, which is 50, VARC, which is verbal ability and reading comprehension, that is also 50 questions. And then you have the abstract reasoning, which is 25 questions. So abstract reasoning is kind of unique to CET. A lot of tests don't have this particular as a section. Very rarely in some of the other tests you may have come across abstract reasoning questions, but as a section it is very, very unique to the Maharashtra MBA CET. Now we're going to talk about each of these sections, and also note that in CET there's no sectional time limit, which means that you can decide how you want to play this game. You can decide to spend more time on a particular area that you are comfortable with, or something that you don't like, you can always keep that section for the end. And because there are no sectional cutoffs as well, it's an overall score that you get out of 200. You just need to decide what is it that you want to maximize. So make sure that you keep that in mind while you're doing your prep as well. You can decide to focus on a particular area more compared to the other areas that are there. The marking scheme is there's +1 and -0, so there's no negative marking that is there. You can decide, of course, you should mark all the questions. By the time you come out of the CET test center, you should have marked all 200 questions. Doesn't matter how many genuine attempts you have had, but make sure that you mark all 200 questions. So with that, let's get started with the individual sections, and I'll be talking about what are the topics and the subtopics that you should focus on. So firstly, when it comes to the logical reasoning section, right, which is the most dominant area, 75 questions out of 200, most of the questions tend to be from, you can call them as puzzles, and puzzles can be slightly longer puzzles like grouping and conditionalities and arrangement kind of puzzles, or they can be direct standalone puzzle, which are basically direct questions. So if you look at the last couple of years, from grouping and arrangements as a broad topic, what kind of questions have appeared? So you can get sets, which are basically anywhere between 3 to 5 questions, where they ask you about some sort of group creation basis some conditions that are given. Then you have linear and matrix arrangements. So you may have linear arrangements which are very, very simple, or matrix arrangements which are slightly complicated as well, with 3 or 4 different factors that are being present. And then circular arrangements. Circular arrangements are generally of two types, everybody facing towards the center, or some facing away from the center. The away from the center is obviously the more complicated version of it. And but in the last couple of years, we haven't seen that particular question type being asked. At a point of time, IBPS used to conduct this particular exam, and they used to ask those questions, but now they have stopped asking. So most of the questions you can expect to be where people are sitting around a circular table, all of them are facing towards the center. So focus on these question types. With this done, let's talk about the puzzles. Standalone puzzles, one-liners, directions, you can have family tree, you can have figure-based, it can be a numerical puzzle, it can be related to selection criteria, though not too many questions, but they give you some information that this is what the company is looking for. And then there are candidates given, you have to decide whether you will select them or reject them. There's limited information or what sort of course of action you should take. Then you have sequential output, which is also known as the input-output question type. Symbol-based logic, word creation, clocks, calendars, all of these are part of puzzle. So clocks and calendars is not considered as part of quant per se, though there's a lot of math which is involved in the clocks questions, not so much in the calendars question. So that is why clocks and calendars generally appears as part of the logical reasoning section. Then series and coding and analogies. Again, a lot of questions related to series. It can be completely numeric series or letter series or alphanumeric series kind of a thing. Coding decoding again can be asked in multiple ways. It can be like a one-liner, or it can be different codes that are given. So typically not very difficult, especially if you know the positions of the letters, which is very important as a skill to have to crack these kind of questions. And then in series, it can be what is the next term in the series, or what is the odd term in the series, or standalone odd one out question. So they give you a set of numbers, it can be some words, and you have to figure out which is the odd one out. And then when it comes to verbal reasoning, that is also included as part of logical reasoning. You have questions on analogies, assertion, reason question, that is again a very commonly seen question type. You have implicit statements that can be again assumptions, conclusion, and then syllogisms. Syllogisms can be, you can have 3 statements, you can have 4 statements. There have been difficult versions of syllogism questions in the past, that which of the following conclusions can be drawn from exactly 2 statements, right? So that adds to the complexity of the question. But otherwise, if you practice syllogisms, you should be fine. So these are the areas within logical reasoning that you need to focus on. Now let's move on to the quant section. A lot of students, especially in CET, firstly they are scared of quant, so they say that I'm going to leave quant completely. That's not a good idea. So you should not leave quant completely. What you need to do is you need to focus on the topics that are important. And when you look at this, I would say if I have to pick, the most important areas are going to be these 3. So when you look at data interpretation, that's around 10 questions that you can get. And by the way, why I have not put the number of questions is because it changes a lot from year to year. It changes a lot from slot to slot. So it's not fixed in a particular year that they're going to ask, okay, 10 questions of DI to everybody who will take the test. It doesn't work that way. And that is why even previous slide, I didn't put the number of questions, because in some slots, for example, last year, there were only a single digit data interpretation questions. In some slot, they had 10 questions or more. So that number is not static. Now within DI, pie charts, tables, bar graphs, line graphs, all of these things you should focus on. And what you need to be good at it is, of course, approximations, and your tables have to be really good. So the percentage, fraction, calculations, all of that. If you're good at it, then of course the data interpretation becomes very easy. So that's about 10 questions. Algebra, you can have linear and quadratic equations. You don't have to do more than that. So just do linear and quadratic equation properties, sum of roots, product of roots, all of those things. You should be fine with it. In arithmetic, it's the whole spectrum, right? So in arithmetic, I'm not going to choose a particular topic over the other. Of course, percentages, ratio proportion, and averages, those 3 are the key to learn the other topics that are there as well. So make sure that you have your percentages, averages, ratio proportion, you have done these very well, and that will help you to learn the remaining topics, okay? Now, regarding the other topics that are asked, of course, you have profit loss discount, SICI, time, speed, distance, time and work. So it's the whole thing within arithmetic that is asked. Anywhere between 1 to 3 questions from each of these topics you can expect. So if you say, for example, let's say time, speed, distance, I don't want to do, will you survive in CET? The answer is yes. So even without doing TST, you will be able to survive fairly comfortably, because you're not going to get too many questions of TST. Then comes the geometry. Now, within geometry, you have all sorts of things, but general focus that we have seen is on triangles and circles. So if you do these 2 topics, you should be comfortable. In addition to that, quadrilaterals, so whether it is parallelogram and squares and rectangles and all those properties, especially area related questions, you should practice. Mensuration is another area, because it is completely formula driven. A lot of students don't like it, but see, formula driven areas are easy, because you just need to know the formula, the concept, and you should be fine. So don't drop it completely. Trigonometry, I think you can still take a call whether you want to do it or not, because of the complexity that is involved, the amount of the number of formulae that you need to by heart to be good at it. So maybe that can be skipped, but triangles, circles, quadrilaterals, mensuration, I'll definitely do. Then within modern math, P and C. Now make sure that you do basics of PNC. You don't have to go to advanced level permutation combination. Basic permutation combination probability, if you have practiced, that should be good enough. In probability, make sure that you practice coins, you practice cards. So these are very important, because most of the questions tend to be around this, and of course the dice questions, right? So coins, dice, and cards, these are the 3 things that you should practice a lot. Then sequence and series and set theory. Again, anywhere between 1 to 3 questions from each of these topics you can expect. And I would say within sequence and series also, it's a fairly easy topic. Do the basic kind of questions, don't do very advanced things. Especially the nth term of a series or sum of n terms of a series, these are all formula driven. And you don't have too many formulae in this topic, so it should be done. And then numbers, you have a lot of questions related to say BODMAS, it could be number properties, divisibility test, HCF, LCM, etc. So practice this as well. So if I have to pick areas, I'm definitely going to focus a lot on arithmetic because that will also build my base for the data interpretation. I'm definitely going to add numbers and I'm going to have algebra. So at least this much, if you do, you will have a decent performance on the quant section. Okay, this is for people who don't like math, who haven't done enough math. But for others, I would say just do everything so that you are able to maximize your score in this section as well. Because this is one area where you're certain of what you have done. Because when you solve a math question, you get an answer, you see it in options, more or less you have got it right. Unless you have made some particular error and you could have got some other answer, that's the right answer, but you haven't got it. Very rare instances that will obviously happen. But in most cases, you know what you have done and whether you're doing it right or wrong. Unlike say something like an RC where there could be some other interpretations as well. And that is why this is a scoring area. I would say don't skip this area if you're planning to crack the CET. Then comes VARC section. Now in VARC, a lot of it is going to be reading comprehension passages, but again in different years they have done different things, and that's why I've written the number of questions can be anywhere between 10 to 20. Because in some slots they have asked about 10 questions, in some slots they have asked 20 questions, and it's not like okay you are going to get 4 RCs with 5 questions each. It is not equally distributed like that. So you may have one RC with only one question on it. Of course it will be a very short RC, but you're going to have a long RC with maybe 5-6 questions based on it as well. So be ready to read lot of RCs too, because it has happened in the past in some of the slots 7, 8, 9 RCs have been asked with total 20 questions on them, right? Because which means that it's a short RC and maybe there's just 1 or 2 questions on each of them. So RC definitely something that you have to practice because that is going to be a significant chunk. And then you have, of course, your grammar, vocab, your confusing words, verbal reasoning, which is like a very standard thing that you see in other tests as well. Now within grammar, grammar rules are a must. You have to know your grammar rules so that you'll be able to answer most of those questions, focusing on prepositions, typical kind of errors that you have, so error spotting, etc. Phrasal verbs, idioms, changing voice, modifiers, etc. So most of it is going to be on spotting errors. So typically a sentence is given with some parts underlined and you have to identify error is in which part or there's no correction that is required. In vocab, you have analogies, you have synonyms, antonyms, and cloze test, which is basically they give you a passage and there are certain words that are blanked out. You have to fill those blanks with the appropriate word. Then you have verbal reasoning, which is parajumble, summary. Inference, assumption, conclusion can also appear in the verbal section. So in some years we have seen that they put it in the verbal section, in some years they put it in logical reasoning section. So you never know where they're going to put it. There have been years where they put even quant questions in the logical reasoning section, but will ignore those issues that have happened in the past. So typically if you do parajumbles, you do summary questions, etc., you should be comfortable while doing the verbal reasoning questions. And anyway, for LR, when it comes to assumptions, inference, conclusion, all of those things you would have prepared. So that prep will also help you for these questions. And finally, it can be, they can include a few questions, again, not too many, regarding confusing words and spellings, right? So stationary, what is the difference between these two? One with A, one with E, right? So those kind of things you should, again, if you do your vocab properly, this part you don't have to worry about. So definitely focus a lot on RC and grammar because that is going to be like a pretty significant chunk. I would say somewhere around 25 to 30 questions. And then the rest of it, which is basically your vocab and verbal reasoning. Okay. And that brings us to the last section, which is the abstract reasoning. Now with abstract reasoning, a lot of students, the range of students that I've seen, some people really like it because you don't have to study this particular thing a lot. It's more observational. It is also fun to do. But then there are some students who don't like it because they never enjoyed it in the past as well. And they think that there is no particular way to prepare for it. It's going to be very random. So why prepare, right? But the thing is you can prepare for this. And for abstract reasoning, I would say if you've done, I would say somewhere around 500 to 600 questions. That's a good enough exposure for this particular area. Now that can come from 20 mock tests that IMS offers. So if you do all 20, you're going to have about 500 questions that you will solve. And then the official mocks that CET Cell has given, so they are there. The last year's papers are there. So all of it combined, I think 600 plus questions, plus the material. I'm not even counting that. That should take your exposure to somewhere around maybe 800 to 1000 questions. That is good enough exposure. Now in abstract reasoning, questions are of again of different type. You have figure-based numerical puzzles, counting-based questions. They're generally tricky because you tend to miss out on a couple of triangles or squares here and there while you're counting. So be careful while you're doing these questions, but this is definitely part of the CET syllabus. Then analogies question. So one image relates to the next in certain way. Then third will relate to the next one in the same way. So you have to identify which image from the options you will get. Then your questions related to cubes. Now cube questions can be of two types. One is related to like a bigger cube being cut, and generally that is something that appears in the logical reasoning section instead of the abstract reasoning section. Here what you will see is that there's a cube and there are numbers or symbols that are written on the cube, different faces. So what will come opposite to what? If you are able to spot that, different rotations are given. You have to identify which is the right option. Then you have questions related to jigsaw. So there are multiple pieces that are given. It could be generally 9 pieces, and you have to figure out which one will exactly fit, let's say in the top left corner or in the middle or the bottom right corner and so on. Then you have odd images. Again, it can be odd image standalone or odd image in series. So it's a variation of a series question. And in series, you have next image. So if the pattern continues, what will be the next image in the series, or one of the middle images or the starting image is not given. There's another one. So odd image in series has two types. Sometimes they give you only say 5 images and you have to identify which is the odd one. Sometimes they give you 7 images where the first and the last are positioned correctly, and in the remaining 5 there's an error. And in that they say that sometimes it is like if you switch the two, then the pattern continues. So which mark the first one out of those two to be switched as your right answer. So there are some variations that they will create, but fundamentally it is just odd image or odd image in series kind of question. And then you have similar dissimilar pair. So they give you two parts to the image and they relate in certain way. From the options you have to identify which is like a similar pair to it or a dissimilar pair to it. So typically anywhere between 2 to 3 questions of each of these types is what you can get. Sometimes even more. So maybe there could be 5 questions of series or 10 questions of series. You never know. And that is why you should not be comfortable with only specific question types, because what if they don't ask enough of that? So let's say I'm very good at cubes, but maybe they ask only one question of it. So that is why I don't want to be in that position. I should do everything with equal importance. So with this, we have covered the syllabus of CET, but understand that the more you practice, the more question types you will discover. And that's the beauty of it. The more question types you become comfortable with, you will have a better score, right? So that is why keep practicing. CET is all about doing many and many questions. So make sure that you practice a lot, take more mock tests so that you can sit at one place for 2.5 hours, go at questions one after the other, and be really fast while solving them. Okay, so that's the syllabus. Focus on these things that we discussed today. We are going to have a separate video on the CET prep strategy, so stay tuned for that. And we recently also did a session on the CET and the JBMS admission process, so have a look at that as well. I hope this has helped you. Thank you so much for watching and wish all of you all the best for the Maharashtra MBA CET.